Hello, I'm Paul Carroll, technical writer for Digital Photo Magazine, and welcome to part 3 of this month's Digital Darkroom video tutorials on recreating black and white special effects. In this part of the tutorial, we'll be looking at how you can mimic lithe printing effects on a black and white image by adding some pinkish brown tones to the highlights and a real gritty quality to the darker shadows. Okay, let's get started. Open up the image lithe from off the CD, and you can see this image has already been converted to black and white, but I did the conversion via the black and white adjustment, and that means the image remains in the RGB colour mode so that we can adjust the colour channels and add that pinkish tones into the highlights. To do this, we're going to be using a curves adjustment because this will allow us to make a localized adjustment to just one part of the tonal register, in this case the highlights. So to do this, go up to the image menu, down to adjustments and across to curves from the flyout menu. If we adjusted the curve line like this with our channel set to RGB, we'd affect all 3 colour channels at the same time, which would just have the effect of changing the contrast of the image. However, as we want to tone the image, we need to adjust the colour channels separately. So up here in the channel box, click on the downward arrow and from the menu select red from the list. Now to add some pinkish red toning just to the highlights, we need to adjust this end of the curve line, which is the highlights. So click on the curve line roughly 3/4 of the way along the line and push the curve line up so that you get an output value of around 220. And you can see from the image behind that that's now applied a red toning pretty much evenly across the whole register. So what we want to do is we want to pull back the center point of the curve line, so click roughly in the center and pull back this part of the line, and what that's doing is it's restricting the red curve to the highlights up in this section here where we've pushed the line up, but it's restricting it in the mid-tones and in the shadows. And as you can see, we've got some red toning there in the highlights, but the blacks and the greys are staying fairly neutral. Okay, next, to make the toning a bit more pinkish and a bit less red, we want to go back to the channel box, click on the downward arrow again, and this time select the green channel. And we're going to make a very similar adjustment to the green curve line than we did with the red curve line. So click roughly 3/4 of the way along, but this time we're just going to push it up a little bit. So an input level of around 190 just reduces the intensity of the reds in the highlights there. And again, click on the center point of the green curve, and if we just bring that back to the center so it's an output of 128 and an input of 128, that looks good. So just click OK to accept the change. Next, we're going to add some noise to the image, but we're going to restrict the noise to the shadow areas to recreate that lithe printing effect. So I've dragged on my layers palette, and if you hold down the shift key and the control key on the keyboard and press the letter N, that brings up the dialog box for a new layer. So click OK, and you can see my new layer has been added in my layers palette. Now hold down the shift key again, and this time press F5 on the keyboard, and that brings up the fill dialog box. And under the contents menu, from the use drop down menu, we want to select 50% grey and click OK. Now this new layer is completely masking our background layer, but don't worry, because in the layers palette, if we just change the blending mode using this drop down menu here to overlay, we now bring through our layer from beneath, and we can apply some noise to layer 1 and then use the blending mode to restrict how that noise is applied to the background layer. So first we need to add some noise. So with layer 1 highlighted, go up to the filter menu, down to noise and across to add noise. The amount of noise that we add can be really strong in this example because we're just going to be restricting it to the shadows, and the lithe printing aesthetic is really noisy and gritty. So an amount of around 25% is fine, and you want to make sure that the Gaussian and monochromatic boxes are both ticked, and then click OK. Now double left click with your mouse on layer 1 in the layer palette, and we launch the layer style dialog box. And it's in here that we can change the blending options of layer 1 and change how the noise that we've added to layer 1 blends with our background layer. To do this, we're going to be using the blend if grey option towards the bottom of the layer styles dialog box, and we're going to be using the underlying layer gradient bar. On your keyboard, hold down the Alt key, and then with your left mouse button click on the white triangle on the right hand side of the underlying layer gradient bar, and then drag the triangle to the left, and you can see there that the triangle splits in two. Now what we're going to do is we want to set the first half of the triangle quite low down the gradient bar to around 10 is fine. Then you can release the Alt button on the keyboard, click with your left mouse button on the remaining half of the white triangle, which is currently up at the highlights, and drag that one down to around 140. And if you have a look at the top left hand corner of the image, as I adjust this second half of the triangle, you can see that the amount of noise that we're adding to the highlight areas is reducing as I change the position of the triangle. So we're now only applying noise from layer 1 to the very darkest tones on the background layer, and then it's graduating away, and so from this sort of midpoint, mid-tone region, we're then not applying any noise at all off into the highlights. Okay, click OK to accept those changes, and then the final adjustment that we need to make is just to add some glow to those highlights. And again, we're going to be doing this with the diffuse glow filter. So in your layers palette, click back on the background layer, go up to the filter menu, down to distort, and across to diffuse glow. This time in the diffuse glow filter, we don't want to be adding any graininess to the image because we've already added our noise and we've restricted it to the shadows. So we can reduce the graininess slider all the way to the left, back down to 0. We can adjust the glow amount slider, and you can see that as I move the slider to the right, we're now really burning out the highlight details up in the top left hand corner of our image. So we need to set a fairly low glow amount, something around 2 looks okay. And finally we need to set the clear amount slider to just restrict how that glow or that diffuse glow filter is being applied to the highlights. And if I move the clear amount to the right a little bit, you can see that we're just bringing through a little bit more detail into those highlights as we restrict where the filter is being applied. I just want to be able to see a little bit of definition in the characters in the distance, so I'm just going to knock it up to about 18. That looks okay, so I'll just click the OK button to accept the changes. And there we go, we've created a lith printing effect with pinkish glowing highlights and real gritty dark shadows. I hope you've enjoyed this and all 3 parts of this month's digital darkroom video tutorials. Give them a go using the start images from off the CD, and then get recreating black and white special effects on your own images in the future. Okay, cheers.